What if I told you Queen Camilla tried to blackmail Prince Harry and Kate Middleton caught her red-handed? Today, we uncover a stunning betrayal inside Kensington Palace. Palace insiders reveal Camilla secretly compiled a hidden blackmail dossier of Harry's most private texts and photos, poised to destroy him if he stepped out of line. But when Kate Middleton stumbled on the explosive evidence tucked away in Camilla's own pantry, she made a decision that shook the royal family's inner circle. Why did Camilla target Harry? How far was she willing to go? And what happens now that the secret is out? Stay with us. What you're about to hear changes everything you thought you knew about the royal family. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It was a discovery that would send shockwaves through the marble halls of Kensington Palace. Behind an ordinary wooden door, in a place as mundane as a pantry drawer, Kate Middleton stumbled upon something she was never meant to see. Files, photos, text messages. A printed dossier so detailed and so damning that it could destroy not only Prince Harry's already fragile reputation but rip apart the remaining shreds of trust within the British royal family. And at the center of this dark web? Queen Camilla. Imagine, for a moment, the weight of such a discovery. Kate wasn't merely holding papers, she was holding a bomb, one that could detonate at any second. But what was even more shocking than the contents of the dossier was the person behind its creation. Camilla, once seen as a redeemed figure in the public eye, had allegedly been orchestrating a campaign of quiet control, weaponizing Prince Harry's vulnerabilities against him. For Kate, this was not a palace intrigue she could overlook. This wasn't gossip or harmless political maneuvering. It was betrayal at the deepest level. And in that moment, standing alone in that cold, silent pantry, the future Queen of England made a decision that would change everything. She would confront Camilla. She would protect Harry. She would defend the honor of the family she married into. There would be no more backroom plots, no more whispered threats, and most importantly, no more place for Camilla in their lives. But how did it come to this? How did the polished public facade of unity within the House of Windsor fracture into secret dossiers, whispered blackmail, and clandestine power struggles? To understand that, we need to rewind to the roots of a conflict that had been quietly growing behind the scenes for years. From the moment Prince Harry and Meghan Markle announced their withdrawal from royal duties, fault lines within the monarchy became visible to the public. Newspapers were filled with reports of rifts between brothers, growing tension between William and Harry, and a collective sense of unease about the future of the royal institution. But what the public didn't see was the growing internal warfare among those left behind. And within this battlefield, Camilla saw an opportunity. Camilla, who had spent decades fighting for public acceptance after the scandalous beginnings of her relationship with Charles, understood better than most how perception could be used as a weapon. She knew that Harry's vulnerabilities, his mental health struggles, his battles with the press, his lingering anger over his mother's death, made him an unpredictable and potentially dangerous figure to the monarchy's image. Controlling him meant securing the monarchy's future, or at least, securing her place within it. According to palace insiders, Camilla allegedly began quietly gathering information. Not the kind of data found on official royal channels, but the sort passed between family members, friends, and trusted aides, private text messages, candid photographs, off-the-cuff remarks that could easily be taken out of context. This wasn't mere curiosity. It was leverage. Insurance against a wild-card prince who had already proven he was willing to air royal dirty laundry to the highest bidder. At first, the collection was discreet. A note here, a text there. But over time, it snowballed into something more organized, something more deliberate. Staff members whispered of strange requests from Camilla's quarters, certain files being pulled, certain digital backups being accessed. Yet in a world ruled by hierarchy and tradition, few dared question her motives. After all, she was the queen. But Camilla underestimated Kate Middleton. Unlike many royal figures who were born into this life, Kate entered the royal world from the outside. She knew the importance of loyalty. She understood that a family is supposed to protect its most vulnerable members, not exploit them. And when Kate found that file, thick with damning material on Prince Harry, organized in cruel detail, she realized that Camilla had crossed a line no one should ever dare to cross. The confrontation was swift. According to sources close to the palace, Kate did not mince words. There was no carefully choreographed meeting under the guise of civility. It was direct, it was fierce, and it left no room for misunderstanding. Camilla's betrayal had been exposed, and there would be consequences. Banishing Camilla from Kensington was not merely symbolic. It was a reclaiming of moral authority. It sent a message that some lines, once crossed, could never be uncrossed. It signaled a new era where manipulation and backroom games would no longer be tolerated within the young branch of the royal family led by William and Kate. But while the confrontation may have been private, its ripple effects were felt publicly. Observers noted the sudden cooling of relations between Kate and Camilla at public events. Photographs that once showed the two women chatting amiably were replaced by stiff, strained interactions, or worse, visible avoidance. The media, though slow to catch on, began whispering about the apparent frostiness. Yet the real story, the explosive story of blackmail and betrayal, remained locked behind palace gates until now. This was not just another petty royal feud. This was a fundamental battle for the soul of the monarchy. And at its heart was a simple but devastating question. Who can be trusted? Today, as the royal family tries to present a united front to the world, the cracks are growing harder to hide. The institution that once seemed unbreakable is being tested from within. And while Camilla may still wear her crown, the trust she once enjoyed among key members of the family has been irrevocably shattered. As for Kate, her role has shifted dramatically. No longer simply the dutiful duchess or the supportive wife, she has emerged as a protector, a woman willing to stand up, even against the highest ranks of royalty, to defend what is right. In doing so, she has not only safeguarded Harry's dignity but also redefined her own position within the royal hierarchy. The story you are about to hear is not just about scandal. It's about power, loyalty, betrayal. It's about how, in the most gilded halls of the world, the fiercest battles are not fought with armies, but with secrets. Stay with us as we unfold the hidden drama behind Kate's fateful discovery, Camilla's desperate gambit, and how one moment in a forgotten pantry may have altered the course of royal history forever. Because sometimes, the most earth-shaking revolutions begin not with a roar, but with the quiet rustle of papers in the dark. Chapter 1. Setting the scene, Palace Under Pressure. The year was 2020, and the British monarchy faced an upheaval unlike any it had experienced in living memory. For centuries, the royal family had survived wars, abdications, and scandals by presenting a united front to the world. No matter the turmoil inside the palace walls, the outside world was shown a perfect portrait: smiles, waving hands, carefully orchestrated public events. But beneath that polished surface, pressure was building to a dangerous level. At the heart of the storm was Prince Harry and his wife, Meghan Markle. Their decision to step back from royal duties, later dubbed Megxit, was a hammer blow to the institution's carefully curated image. The Sussexes' claims of mistreatment by the royal household, subtle racism, and a toxic press environment painted the monarchy in a deeply unflattering light. Suddenly, the royal family no longer seemed untouchable. Suddenly, the cracks were too big to hide. For Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall, newly minted queen consort in all but title, this situation was fraught with peril. She had spent decades fighting for public acceptance after the scandalous collapse of Charles's marriage to Princess Diana. Slowly and painfully, she had rehabilitated her image, positioning herself as a steady, supportive figure by Charles's side. Megxit threatened to undo all of that progress. Public sentiment swung wildly, and old wounds reopened. Diana's ghost loomed larger than ever. The monarchy's reputation teetered on a knife's edge. Camilla was not someone who trusted easily. She knew the power of public opinion. She had seen how a single headline, a single photo, could turn the tide of history. And now, inside the palace, there were whispers that Harry had more damaging stories to tell, not just about the royal family at large, but specifically about Camilla herself. It wasn't just paranoia. Harry's public interviews hinted at deep resentment, particularly toward the woman he saw as a disruptive force in his parents' marriage. In private, it was said, he was even more candid. Palace insiders claimed that Harry still harbored anger toward Camilla, blaming her for much of the unhappiness that plagued his childhood. He saw her not as a harmless grandmotherly figure, but as someone who had manipulated events to her advantage. In this tense environment, where old grievances festered and new scandals threatened to explode daily, Camilla decided she needed protection. Not just from Harry's accusations, but from any shift in the balance of royal power that could leave her vulnerable. Her solution was both simple and chilling: gather intelligence. Kensington Palace, traditionally the home base for William and Kate, had become a hub of modern royal activity. It was there that staff, aides, and advisors worked on speeches, events, and charity initiatives. It was also where secrets were traded, in whispered conversations over cups of tea, in hurried text messages between courtiers, and private emails sent late at night. Camilla's network of loyalists within the royal household was subtle but effective. Over time, she managed to collect snippets of Harry's private life, stories of heated arguments with family members, reckless nights out during his military days, even personal communications that painted him in a volatile light. It wasn't about shaming Harry in public, not yet. It was about having insurance. If Harry ever decided to unleash his full fury on the royal family, Camilla would have ammunition to discredit him. Meanwhile, the relationship between William and Harry continued to deteriorate. Once inseparable, the brothers now barely spoke. William, bound by duty and a sense of obligation to the crown, saw Harry's actions as selfish and destructive. Harry, for his part, felt abandoned by the institution he had once pledged to serve. Their rift widened with each passing month, creating a vacuum of trust and stability within the royal family. Kate Middleton, caught between loyalty to her husband and sympathy for her brother-in-law, tried to maintain peace. She reached out to Harry, even after Megxit, in private attempts to mend the rift. But her efforts were undermined by deeper forces at work, forces that she had not yet fully uncovered. Camilla watched all of this unfold with calculating eyes. As tensions escalated, her influence over Charles grew stronger. Charles, deeply focused on securing his own legacy as the next monarch, leaned heavily on Camilla for advice and emotional support. She was his confidant, his strategist, and increasingly, his gatekeeper. Few dared question her expanding role. But while Camilla's position with Charles solidified, her standing with William and Kate grew more precarious. The younger royals represented the future of the monarchy, a modern, relatable image that resonated with younger generations. Camilla, despite her public efforts to modernize her image, was still viewed by many as a relic of the old guard. Behind the scenes, subtle power struggles played out. Decisions about charity patronages, public appearances, and even seating arrangements at official events became battlegrounds for influence. Every smile, every handshake, every whispered word was analyzed for signs of shifting alliances. For the public, these tensions were invisible. The royal family maintained their tradition of stoic unity during public appearances. But palace insiders knew the truth. The House of Windsor was a house divided. In this cauldron of mistrust and ambition, the seeds of the scandal were sown. Camilla's dossier on Harry grew thicker by the month, quietly tucked away among other sensitive documents. Few knew of its existence. Fewer still understood its potential power. Kate's discovery of the dossier was not just accidental. It was the inevitable result of a palace operating under siege conditions, where secrets piled up like dry tinder, waiting for a spark. The pressure within the royal family was unsustainable. Something, or someone, would eventually break. But no one, least of all Camilla, expected it to be Kate. As the royal family braced for more public challenges, another tell-all interview, more leaked memoirs, growing public disillusionment, the private battles waged within their walls remained hidden. For now, Kate's decision to act, to confront Camilla head-on, would not only bring these hidden battles into the light, but would also reshape the future of the monarchy in ways that even the most seasoned royal observers could not predict. Prince Harry has always been different. From the moment he was born, the world saw him through the lens of comparison. William was the heir, Harry was the spare. It was a label that stuck, shaping public perception and, perhaps more importantly, shaping Harry's own sense of identity. While William bore the crushing weight of future kingship, Harry was allowed, even expected, to be the wild one, the impulsive one, the mischievous prince. But behind the grins and headlines was a boy carrying deep wounds. Harry's vulnerability did not start with Megxit. It did not begin with Meghan Markle or the tabloid feuds, or even with his tense relationship with his brother. It started much earlier, in the dim corridors of Kensington Palace, in the silent glances exchanged between his parents, and the knowledge that his family was crumbling even as the world cheered their fairy tale image. The death of Princess Diana in 1997 shattered what little sense of stability Harry had left. He was only 12 years old, still young enough to crave his mother's comfort but old enough to understand, in a visceral way, that she had been taken from him forever. The trauma of losing her, and the brutal way the media hounded her to her death, left scars that never fully healed. For years, Harry suppressed his grief. The royal family, bound by tradition and stoicism, offered little space for open emotional expression. Public appearances were about dignity, not vulnerability. Behind palace walls, there was little room for crying or long discussions about feelings. Harry learned early that emotions were a private matter, something to be hidden away like an embarrassing flaw. But pain that is buried has a way of resurfacing, often in destructive ways. In his teenage years and early 20s, Harry's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He was photographed wearing a Nazi costume to a party, captured stumbling out of clubs in the early hours, caught smoking marijuana at a young age. The tabloids labeled him a rebel, a bad boy. The palace brushed off the incidents as youthful indiscretions. But insiders saw something different, a young man in deep pain, searching for a way to numb the loss he could not speak of. Harry's military career provided a temporary reprieve. Serving in Afghanistan, he found a sense of purpose that had long eluded him within palace walls. Among fellow soldiers, there were no titles, no deference, no suffocating expectations. There was only camaraderie, duty, and survival. For the first time, Harry felt truly useful, truly valued for who he was, not for the title he carried. But even the military could not protect him from his inner demons. Upon returning to civilian life, Harry struggled with depression, anxiety, and anger. He admitted to seeking therapy years later, revealing just how close he had come to falling apart completely. His vulnerability was not an act. It was real, raw, and rooted in decades of unresolved grief. It was in this fragile state that Harry entered adulthood, a prince without a clear role, a public figure yearning for a private life, a man searching desperately for connection and purpose. Meghan Markle offered both. With her, Harry found a partner who encouraged him to speak openly about his feelings, to challenge the royal family's culture of emotional repression, to seek healing. But in doing so, he also became more isolated from the institution that had shaped him. To Camilla, Harry's vulnerability was a liability. A prince with a wounded soul was unpredictable, dangerous. He could say things he wasn't supposed to say, reveal secrets that were meant to stay buried. His emotional volatility made him a wild card, and wild cards threatened the stability of the monarchy. Sources close to the palace suggest that Camilla, far from being a detached observer, took a keen interest in Harry's psychological state. She reportedly expressed concern about his outbursts, his interviews, his willingness to publicly criticize the royal family. But concern, in the world of palace politics, is often indistinguishable from calculation. Gathering information about Harry's private struggles served two purposes. First, it allowed Camilla to anticipate any potential threats he might pose to the monarchy's image. Second, it gave her leverage. If Harry ever decided to go fully rogue, she would have the means to discredit him, not through public attacks, but through quiet, devastating leaks designed to erode his credibility. The nature of the information collected was deeply personal. Text messages exchanged with friends, photographs from private gatherings, anecdotes about heated arguments and emotional breakdowns. Individually, they might seem innocuous. Together, they painted a portrait of a man teetering on the edge, a portrait that could easily be weaponized. It's important to understand that Harry's vulnerabilities were not signs of weakness. They were evidence of his humanity, his refusal to conform to a system that demanded emotional suppression at all costs. In speaking openly about his mental health struggles, Harry helped destigmatize these issues for millions around the world. But within the palace, his openness was seen not as bravery, but as recklessness. The dynamic between Harry and Camilla was further complicated by lingering resentment over the past. Harry had been deeply loyal to his mother's memory, and Diana's painful divorce from Charles, followed by Camilla's emergence as Charles's new partner, left emotional scars that time could not fully heal. Harry's distrust of Camilla was palpable. In private, he reportedly referred to her in unflattering terms, making little effort to conceal his disdain. Camilla, for her part, was well aware of Harry's hostility. Though she maintained a public image of familial warmth, those who knew her best said she harbored her own grudges. Camilla had fought long and hard to earn her place beside Charles. She would not allow a volatile, unpredictable prince to undermine everything she had built. The collection of the dossier on Harry's vulnerabilities was not merely an act of self-defense. It was a preemptive strike in a battle that had not yet begun, but whose outlines were already becoming visible. If Harry ever moved against the monarchy, if he ever revealed damaging secrets or launched a public crusade against his family, Camilla would be ready. Kate Middleton's discovery of the dossier was, in this context, a turning point. Kate had always tried to bridge the gap between the old and new generations of the royal family. She was, in many ways, the monarchy's best hope for modernization, relatable, elegant, empathetic. She understood Harry's pain. She sympathized with his struggles. And when she found evidence that Camilla had been stockpiling Harry's most private vulnerabilities, it was a betrayal she could not forgive. Kate saw the bigger picture. She understood that the monarchy could not survive by cannibalizing its own. Protecting the institution meant protecting its most human elements, not exploiting them for personal gain. In confronting Camilla, Kate was not just defending Harry. She was defending the very idea of a royal family rooted in loyalty and compassion, rather than cold political maneuvering. The discovery of the dossier also forced Kate to confront a deeper, more uncomfortable reality, that within the palace, trust was an illusion. Alliances were temporary. Loyalty was conditional. Secrets were currency. And in this ruthless environment, even the most sacred bonds, those of family, could be weaponized. Harry's vulnerabilities made him a target, but they also made him a symbol of the humanity the monarchy desperately needed to embrace if it hoped to survive in a modern world that no longer revered titles or bloodlines without question. In the end, Harry's pain became the battleground on which a much larger war for the future of the monarchy would be fought. And Kate, standing alone in that pantry with the dossier in her hands, made a choice that would echo through the halls of power for years to come. She chose to fight for the vulnerable, not the powerful. She chose to protect family over institution. She chose, ultimately, to do what Harry himself had always struggled to do, to confront the hidden darkness within the royal family, and to say, no more. The path forward would not be easy. The battle lines had been drawn. But for the first time in a long time, someone within the palace was fighting not for position, not for survival, but for something far more important: integrity. The dossier itself was not large in size, but it carried the weight of a royal scandal that could have shaken the monarchy to its core. Bound in a simple leather folder, it did not bear any royal crest, no official insignia, nothing that would link it directly to Camilla or the palace. Its plainness was deliberate. In the world of palace intrigue, the most dangerous documents were always the ones that appeared the most ordinary. Inside the folder, carefully organized into sections, lay the details of Prince Harry's most private moments. Some entries were simple: transcripts of emotional text messages sent during dark periods of his life, photographs taken in moments of vulnerability, and handwritten notes that revealed deep personal insecurities. Other items were more damning: accounts of arguments with senior royals, angry voicemails left for aides, stories of reckless behavior that had never made it to the tabloids. The first section of the dossier contained personal communications, text messages, and emails Harry had exchanged with close friends and confidants over the years. Many were heartfelt, revealing a man struggling to find his place in a world that often felt alien and hostile. Others were angrier, filled with resentment toward the royal family, toward the press, even toward his own brother. In isolation, these messages might have been seen as normal venting. But taken together, they painted a picture of a deeply troubled man on the edge. One message in particular stood out. Sent during a particularly low point after a heated argument with Prince William, Harry had written, "Sometimes I think the only way out is to walk away from all of it. The titles, the duties, everything. They don't care about me. Not really. They only care about what I represent." It was a message of despair, a glimpse into the private agony that Harry had so often hidden from the public. The second section consisted of photographs. Some were harmless enough, images of Harry at private parties, laughing with friends, drinks in hand. But others were less flattering: blurry snapshots of Harry looking intoxicated, moments where he appeared out of control or overwhelmed. None of the images were illegal or scandalous in the criminal sense, but they could easily have been twisted by the media into narratives of instability, recklessness, and poor judgment. One particularly sensitive photograph showed Harry in tears during a private memorial service for his mother, surrounded by only a handful of trusted friends. It was a raw, deeply human moment, the kind that, if leaked to the press, would not just embarrass Harry but violate the very core of his private grief. The third section contained anecdotal accounts from palace insiders. Staff members had recounted stories of Harry's outbursts behind closed doors, shouting matches with advisors, heated debates over press releases, emotional breakdowns triggered by media coverage. These accounts were not written in an official capacity. They were informal notes, collected quietly over time, often framed in the most uncharitable light possible. In one account, an aide described how Harry had reportedly thrown a mobile phone against a wall during a particularly tense meeting about media strategy. Another spoke of Harry storming out of a family gathering after a disagreement over how Meghan had been treated by palace staff. In the hands of a sympathetic narrator, these incidents might have been seen as the understandable reactions of a man under intense pressure. In the context of the dossier, however, they were framed as evidence of instability, immaturity, and emotional volatility. The fourth section ventured into more speculative territory. It included rumors, unverified, often secondhand, about Harry's behavior during his military service, his relationships with ex-girlfriends, his supposed reliance on alcohol and therapy sessions. None of this was confirmed, and much of it was likely exaggerated. But in the court of public opinion, even rumors could be devastating if deployed strategically. The dossier also contained notes on Harry's relationship with Meghan Markle. There were details about their courtship, private arguments, and their growing disillusionment with palace life. Some entries were innocuous, while others hinted at deeper tensions, disagreements over public appearances, frustrations with royal protocol, feelings of isolation within the family. These details, if leaked, could have fueled damaging headlines suggesting marital discord or reinforcing the narrative that Harry had been manipulated into turning against his own family. What made the dossier particularly chilling was not just its content, but its intent. This was not a random collection of gossip. It was curated, organized, and annotated with specific notes about how each piece of information could be used. Certain messages were marked with comments like potential press angle or could influence public sympathy. It was clear that the dossier was designed to be a weapon, not necessarily for immediate use, but kept ready in case the need ever arose. The question of how Camilla obtained all this information remains murky. Palace insiders suspect a combination of methods: loyal staff members who shared gossip in exchange for favor, private investigators working unofficially, and digital surveillance that, while technically legal, treaded ethical gray areas. The royal family had long maintained private security and intelligence networks designed to protect its members. It was not a stretch to imagine that those same networks could be repurposed for less noble aims. It is also worth noting that the royal household operates under a different set of rules than the general public. Privacy, while valued, is often subordinated to the needs of the institution. Staff members sign confidentiality agreements, but the lines between personal loyalty and institutional loyalty are often blurred. In an environment where everyone's job depends on royal favor, the temptation to curry influence by sharing private information is immense. For Kate, finding the dossier was more than just a shocking discovery. It was a revelation of how deeply the culture of mistrust had permeated the royal family. The very existence of such a document revealed an environment where betrayal was not only possible but anticipated. It suggested that within the highest echelons of the monarchy, family bonds had been replaced by political calculations. Kate knew immediately the danger such a dossier represented, not just to Harry, but to the entire royal family. If it ever leaked, the monarchy's carefully curated image of stability and unity would be irreparably damaged. Public sympathy for Harry and Meghan, already high in some quarters, would skyrocket. The palace's reputation, already battered by accusations of racism and coldness, would suffer another brutal blow. Even worse, the dossier's leak would reveal the monarchy's willingness to spy on and manipulate its own members. The narrative would shift from one of a noble institution besieged by rebellious upstarts to a cold, calculating machine willing to destroy its own to preserve its power. It would be a public relations catastrophe from which the monarchy might not recover. Kate's decision to act swiftly and decisively was shaped by this understanding. Confronting Camilla was not just about personal outrage. It was about damage control, about containing a threat that could have unleashed a scandal on a scale not seen since the abdication crisis of 1936. There was no possibility of involving outside authorities. Royal scandals are handled internally, with discretion and ruthlessness. Kate understood that appealing to higher powers within the institution would be futile. Many of them would see Camilla's actions as prudent, even necessary. To them, Harry's vulnerability was not something to be protected. It was a risk to be managed. Thus, Kate took matters into her own hands. Her confrontation with Camilla was a rare act of defiance within a system that prizes obedience above all else. It was a statement that some lines should not be crossed, that family should mean more than politics. In the end, the dossier was not leaked. It remains, presumably, locked away, a ticking time bomb whose existence is known to only a few. But its discovery marked a turning point in the internal dynamics of the royal family. Trust, already in short supply, became even scarcer. Relationships that were once merely strained became irreparably broken. And beneath the smiling faces and choreographed appearances, the quiet war within the royal household raged on. As for Harry, it is unclear whether he ever learned of the dossier's existence. Perhaps it is better that he did not. Some betrayals are too painful to confront, even for a man who has faced more than his share of loss. But for Kate, the memory of that discovery, the cold feel of the leather folder, the sickening realization of its contents, would never fade. It was a reminder that even in the most gilded palaces, human nature remains fragile, selfish, and, at times, brutally cruel. The blackmail dossier was not just a collection of secrets. It was a mirror, reflecting the darkest corners of an institution built on appearances. And once you have seen the truth behind the mask, you can never unsee it. The day Kate stumbled upon the dossier was unremarkable at first. It was a cool afternoon at Kensington Palace, the kind of day that passed with a steady rhythm of meetings, briefings, and quiet domestic routines. William was away attending official duties, and the palace staff moved about their business with the hushed efficiency typical of royal households. Kate, dressed simply and without an entourage, was moving through the private family wing, checking on preparations for an upcoming event. It was in a small, lesser-used part of the kitchen pantry that the folder caught her eye. Not because it was prominently placed, but precisely because it wasn't. Tucked inside a drawer usually reserved for spare linens and silverware polishing cloths, the folder looked out of place. Kate, always observant, noticed the slight misalignment, the way the drawer didn't close properly. A small detail easily missed by others, but not by her. Something about it made her pause. Instinct more than anything else. A sense that something was off. She pulled the drawer open fully and saw it. A leather folder, plain but clearly expensive, worn slightly at the edges as if handled often. No lock, no label. Just sitting there, waiting to be discovered. For a brief moment, Kate hesitated. She was not someone prone to prying. She understood better than most the importance of discretion within palace walls. Yet something told her that this was no ordinary misplaced document. The secrecy of its hiding place, the aura of something deliberately concealed, gnawed at her instincts. She lifted the folder and opened it. The first thing she saw was a photograph, a candid shot of Prince Harry, clearly distressed, in a private setting that no member of the public had ever seen. Beneath it, neatly arranged, were sheets of paper filled with text messages, notes, accounts of private conversations. As she turned page after page, a slow, sinking horror gripped her. It wasn't just the content that disturbed her, but the intent behind it. Each document, each photograph, had been carefully chosen, compiled with a specific narrative in mind. Harry is unstable, as reckless, as emotionally volatile. It was a portrait designed not for understanding, but for manipulation. Kate's hands trembled slightly as she reached the final pages. Annotations in the margins caught her attention, small, careful notes suggesting how each piece of information might be used. Potential PR liability. Could justify distancing publicly if necessary. Frame as mental health concern. The clinical coldness of it stunned her. This was not concern for Harry's well-being. It was preparation for his potential destruction. Kate closed the folder slowly, her mind racing. She understood immediately the implications of what she had found. This was bigger than a mere family dispute. This was palace warfare, and Camilla was at the center of it. The shock turned quickly to anger. Kate was known for her calm demeanor, her ability to maintain composure even under the most intense scrutiny. But in that moment, she felt a surge of fury so intense it startled even herself. This was Harry, her brother-in-law, her children's uncle. A man who had suffered enough loss for one lifetime. To see his private pain cataloged like ammunition was a betrayal she could not tolerate. She left the pantry, folder in hand, moving quickly but silently through the palace corridors. She knew she had to confront Camilla, but she also knew she needed to be smart about it. A public scene would solve nothing and could make matters worse. This confrontation had to happen privately, with no witnesses who could twist the narrative. Kate found Camilla later that day in one of the smaller sitting rooms, where she often spent time reading or receiving private visitors. Camilla looked up from her book, a polite smile on her face that faltered slightly when she saw Kate's expression. There was no preamble. Kate placed the folder on the small table between them. "What is this?" she asked, her voice low but firm. Camilla said nothing at first. Her eyes flickered to the folder, then back to Kate. For a moment, a flash of something annoyance, perhaps, or calculation crossed her face. "I think you know exactly what it is," Kate continued. Camilla leaned back slightly in her chair, recovering her composure. "Information," she said, her voice measured. "For the protection of the family." "Protection?" Kate repeated, her anger simmering beneath the surface. "You call this protection?" She opened the folder again, pulling out one of the photographs. She held it up for Camilla to see, an image of Harry in a moment of deep emotional vulnerability. "This is exploitation," Kate said. "This is betrayal." Camilla sighed, a sound that carried equal parts irritation and resignation. "You're young," she said, her tone patronizing. "You don't understand how these things work. Sometimes difficult choices must be made to protect the institution. Harry has become unpredictable. We have to be ready." Kate shook her head. "No. We don't protect the family by tearing it apart from within. We don't protect the institution by betraying the people it's supposed to stand for." Camilla's smile was thin and unconvincing. "You're naive if you think feelings matter more than survival." The words hung heavy in the air. In that moment, Kate saw Camilla clearly for what she was, not just a woman shaped by decades of royal survival tactics, but someone willing to cross any line, sacrifice any bond, to maintain her position. It wasn't just about protecting the crown. It was about protecting herself. Kate closed the folder again, her decision crystallizing. "You are no longer welcome at Kensington," she said quietly but with absolute finality. Camilla's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of anger breaking through her practiced mask. "You don't have the authority." "I have the moral authority," Kate interrupted. "And William will stand with me." She left the room without another word, carrying the folder with her. There was nothing more to be said. The days that followed were tense but carefully managed. Official statements spoke of scheduling conflicts, personal retreats, and vague health concerns. The public saw none of the turmoil. But those within palace walls knew the truth. A line had been drawn, and Camilla had been pushed to the margins of Kensington life. Kate made sure the dossier was secured, locked away where it could do no further harm. She did not destroy it. She understood that it might still serve as protection if needed. But she also made it clear to those closest to her that its use would be a last resort, not a weapon of first strike. The fallout was subtle but unmistakable. Relations between Kate and Camilla cooled visibly, even under the scrutiny of public events. Where once there had been carefully staged displays of warmth, there was now a studied nut. The fallout was subtle but unmistakable. Relations between Kate and Camilla cooled visibly, even under the scrutiny of public events. Where once there had been carefully staged displays of warmth, there was now a studied neutrality, a polite but unmistakable distance. Within the royal family, alliances shifted. Some quietly supported Kate's stand, admiring her courage in facing down a senior royal. Others grumbled that she had overstepped, that palace politics required a more delicate touch. But Kate did not waver. She had made her choice. She would not be complicit in betrayal. She would not allow fear and cynicism to dictate the future of the monarchy she would one day help lead. As for Camilla, she retreated into a smaller, more isolated role within the palace. She still held public appearances alongside Charles, still smiled for the cameras, but behind the scenes, her influence waned. She had been exposed, if only internally, and her ability to maneuver unchecked was gone. Kate's discovery of the dossier and her confrontation with Camilla marked a turning point not just for their personal relationship but for the culture of the royal family itself. It was a reminder that integrity still had a place within those ancient walls, that loyalty to family could still triumph over loyalty to institution. It was a small victory in a long, ongoing battle for the soul of the monarchy. But it was a victory nonetheless. And in the quiet moments, when the corridors of Kensington Palace grew still and the weight of her role pressed heavily upon her, Kate could take solace in one unshakable truth. She had chosen the harder path, the braver path, and she had not faltered. In the end, history would remember not just the scandals and betrayals, but the moments of courage that held the fabric of the royal family together, thread by fragile thread. Confrontations inside royal palaces are not like those outside. They are not loud, public, or unrestrained. They happen behind closed doors, in rooms heavy with history, beneath ceilings painted with scenes of power and legacy. They are whispered wars, fought with quiet words, measured tones, and lethal restraint. But what happened between Kate and Camilla that day was different. It carried a raw honesty that rarely found its way into the gilded halls of royalty. Kate did not seek permission. She did not consult aides, advisors, or even William before making her move. She understood that some battles are too personal, too immediate, to be filtered through the machinery of protocol. She needed to speak directly to Camilla, and she needed to do it on her terms. Camilla was found in the private library, a room she often used when she wanted solitude. She was sitting in a high-backed chair, a glass of sherry at her side, a novel resting on her lap. When Kate entered, Camilla looked up, surprised but unruffled. Kate closed the door behind her with a soft click. The folder was in her hands. For a moment, neither woman spoke. The silence stretched, taut and heavy. Kate moved forward and placed the folder on the low table between them, her eyes never leaving Camilla's face. Camilla's gaze flickered to the folder, then back to Kate. Her mouth tightened slightly. She understood immediately what was coming. "This ends now," Kate said, her voice low and steady. Camilla set her book aside with deliberate slowness. She picked up her glass, took a small sip, and placed it back on the table. "I don't know what you think you've found," Camilla said, her tone carefully neutral. Kate opened the folder, revealing the first page, a copy of one of Harry's private text messages, annotated in the margins with strategic notes. She slid it toward Camilla without a word. Camilla glanced down at the document, then back up, her face a mask of indifference. "Information gathering is not new," she said. "It's necessary. Especially when one of our own is threatening the stability of the entire institution." Kate's hands were steady, but inside, anger burned hot. "You're talking about a human being," Kate said. "Not a threat. Not a problem to be contained. A man. A brother. My children's uncle." Camilla's expression hardened. "He's reckless. He doesn't understand what he's putting at risk. You don't either, if you think sympathy will shield you from the consequences." Kate leaned in slightly, her voice dropping even lower. "No one is denying that Harry has made mistakes," she said. "But what you've done, what you've prepared to do, is far worse." Camilla's lips curled into a faint, cold smile. "You're young," she said again, as she had in their first confrontation. "You still believe in fairy tales, in loyalty, in family. But the monarchy isn't a family. It's an institution, a machine. And machines crush whatever threatens them." Kate shook her head. "It doesn't have to be that way. Not if we choose differently." Camilla's smile faded. She saw then that Kate was not going to back down, not going to be cowed by tradition or fear. There was a strength in Kate that many had underestimated, a quiet, unyielding core that no amount of royal protocol could bend. "You're making a mistake," Camilla said. Kate gathered the papers back into the folder and stood up. "No," she said. "You did." The room felt colder somehow, the air thicker. Kate turned and walked to the door, pausing only briefly before looking back at Camilla. "You're no longer welcome at Kensington." Effective immediately. Without waiting for a response, Kate left, the door clicking shut behind her. The aftermath of the confrontation was swift and brutal. Within hours, Camilla's scheduled appearances at Kensington events were quietly canceled. Staff who had worked under her guidance were reassigned. There were no public announcements, no official statements, but inside the palace, the message was clear. Camilla's influence at Kensington was over. The Queen Consort retained her status, her title, her public image. But behind the scenes, her standing was irreparably damaged. William supported Kate fully, backing her decision without hesitation once he was briefed on the situation. Together, they reinforced the boundaries around their family, insulating themselves from the toxic games that had plagued the royal household for too long. For Kate, the confrontation had been necessary but costly. She understood that taking a stand against a figure as powerful as Camilla would have consequences. Whispers followed her through palace corridors. Some senior courtiers viewed her as dangerously idealistic. Others admired her for doing what so few dared. William, for his part, admired her resolve. In private, he reassured her that she had done the right thing, that protecting Harry's dignity, even at a distance, was an act of true leadership. Harry might never know the full extent of what had been done to protect him. But that was not the point. It was about doing what was right, not what was recognized. Camilla withdrew into her own sphere of influence, focusing more heavily on supporting Charles and his public duties. The fracture between her and the younger royals remained, a quiet but undeniable rift that would color future interactions. Official photographs captured forced smiles, choreographed appearances, but the warmth was gone. The public never saw the invisible walls that had risen between them, but those within the family felt them keenly. The confrontation between Kate and Camilla did not resolve all the tensions within the royal family. Far from it. The institution remained a place of competing interests, hidden agendas, and shifting loyalties. But it marked a turning point, a moment when someone stood up and said no. No to manipulation. No to betrayal. No to sacrificing individuals for the sake of an image. Kate's decision to confront Camilla was not born of recklessness or naivety. It was a conscious choice, made with full understanding of the risks. It was a choice to prioritize humanity over politics, integrity over survival tactics. And in doing so, she set a new standard for what leadership within the monarchy could look like. In the weeks that followed, Kate worked to rebuild trust within her immediate circle. She reinforced the message that loyalty must run deeper than fear, that the royal family must protect its own, not tear them down. Slowly, a new culture began to take root within Kensington Palace, one based not on ruthless self-preservation, but on genuine mutual support. It was a small change, fragile and imperfect, but it was real. As for Camilla, she adjusted to her diminished role with outward grace. Publicly, she maintained her duties with skill and composure. Privately, she harbored a simmering resentment toward Kate that never fully cooled. In her eyes, Kate had overstepped, challenged the natural order of palace hierarchy. But there was little she could do without exposing herself further. The confrontation remained a secret known only to a few. There were no leaks, no salacious headlines. In a world where image was everything, preserving the illusion of unity remained paramount. But within the palace walls, those who knew the truth understood that a line had been drawn and that the balance of power had shifted. Kate's actions sent a message to all who worked within the royal household. Decency still mattered. Betrayal would not go unchecked. And the future of the monarchy would be shaped not by those who schemed best, but by those who stood strongest. It was a lesson hard-earned, and one that would echo through the next turbulent chapters of royal history. In the end, the confrontation between Kate and Camilla was not just a clash of personalities. It was a battle for the soul of the monarchy itself. A battle between old, ruthless survival instincts and a new vision rooted in compassion, integrity, and quiet strength. Kate did not just win that battle. She changed the game, and the effects of that confrontation would be felt long after the immediate crisis had passed, rippling through generations to come, a silent but indelible legacy written not in headlines, but in the very fabric of the royal family's future. To understand why Camilla would go to such lengths against Prince Harry, one must first understand her journey into the royal family. It was not smooth, not celebrated, and certainly not easy. She had entered the public consciousness as the other woman, the figure many blamed for the unraveling of Charles and Diana's marriage. For years, she bore the weight of public disdain, depicted as the villain in a tragic royal saga. Acceptance did not come easily or quickly. Every smile, every handshake, every carefully staged photo was part of a slow, painstaking campaign to rehabilitate her image. Camilla knew better than anyone how fragile public opinion could be. She understood that the monarchy survived not through divine right, but through perception. In the modern age, where headlines could shape destinies overnight, survival was a matter of managing narratives. And in this battle, information was power. Harry represented a unique threat to that power. He was popular in ways that Camilla could never replicate. The public loved him for his honesty, his vulnerability, his refusal to be a perfect royal automaton. For all his flaws, Harry connected with people on a human level, something Camilla struggled to achieve even after decades of effort. But Harry's unpredictability was a deeper threat than mere popularity contests. He had lived through the chaos of his parents' marriage and divorce. He had seen firsthand how the royal family operated in moments of crisis, how image was valued over truth, how individuals could be sacrificed for the sake of the institution's survival. Unlike William, who was carefully groomed to protect the system, Harry had little incentive to play by the unspoken rules. His departure from royal duties only made him more dangerous. What terrified Camilla was not just that Harry might speak out, but that he would speak truthfully. Harry's version of events could not be easily dismissed as fiction or slander. He had lived through the experiences. His words would carry the weight of personal suffering, not political grievance. In a world where the royal family increasingly depended on soft power, charm, charity, emotional resonance, Harry's testimony could be devastating. Camilla's strategy was rooted in a principle as old as power itself: control the story or be destroyed by it. If Harry ever moved against her, the best defense would be to paint him as unstable, unreliable, consumed by personal demons. If the public saw Harry as broken, as a man lashing out because of his own issues, his accusations could be minimized, dismissed, ignored. It was a cold calculation, but it made perfect sense within the brutal logic of palace survival. There were other factors, more personal ones, that deepened Camilla's motivations. Despite the outward displays of familial unity, insiders knew that Harry's relationship with Camilla had always been strained. He had never fully accepted her, never warmed to her the way William eventually did. There was an unspoken tension whenever they shared space, a lingering resentment that neither party could completely conceal. Harry idolized his mother. Diana's legacy was not just a private memory for him, it was a public cause. And in Harry's mind, Camilla was inextricably linked to his mother's suffering. Even as Camilla sought to rewrite her image as a loving stepmother, Harry remained a stubborn reminder that some wounds do not heal with time or PR campaigns. Camilla, for her part, could not afford to be seen as the villain of Harry's story. She had spent too long, fought too hard, to secure her place beside Charles. Any narrative that reopened old wounds, that revived the specter of Diana's martyrdom at Camilla's expense, was a direct threat to her future. When Harry and Meghan began publicly criticizing the royal family, Camilla felt the walls closing in. Their interviews hinted at systemic problems within the palace. Their documentary projects promised even more revelations. Their memoirs loomed like swords over the carefully constructed image the monarchy had worked so hard to maintain. For Camilla, the danger was twofold. On one hand, there was the immediate risk of personal embarrassment, of having old sins dragged into the spotlight once more. On the other, there was the strategic risk to the monarchy's stability. If public trust in the royal family crumbled, so too would the institution that protected her. This combination of personal grievance and institutional fear created a perfect storm. It was not enough to hope that Harry would remain silent. Camilla needed leverage, insurance, something that could be used to discredit him if the worst came to pass. Thus, the dossier was born, a weapon of last resort, a safeguard against a prince who had already shown he was willing to burn bridges. The methods used to compile the dossier reveal much about Camilla's mindset. It was not a hastily assembled collection of rumors. It was a carefully curated file, drawn from real communications, eyewitness accounts, and plausible rumors. It was crafted not for truth, but for strategic impact. The goal was not necessarily to destroy Harry outright. That would have been too risky, too messy. The aim was to undermine him subtly, to create a cloud of doubt around anything he might say. If Harry spoke out, the palace could respond not with outright denials, but with gentle insinuations, concerns about his emotional stability, his judgment, his motives. It was a strategy designed to erode credibility without appearing vindictive. Camilla was not the first royal to engage in such tactics. The history of the monarchy is littered with stories of backroom manipulations, of siblings and spouses undermining each other in the shadows. In the brutal chess game of royal politics, every player learned early that survival depended not just on loyalty, but on information. But what made Camilla's actions different was the target. Harry was not a rival for the throne. He posed no political challenge to Charles or Camilla. His threat was emotional, symbolic. He threatened to resurrect narratives that the monarchy had spent decades trying to bury. He threatened to remind the world of a time when the royal family had failed spectacularly to protect one of its own. In this light, Camilla's actions were not just defensive. They were preemptive strikes against a battle she feared she could not win on merit alone. The emotional cost of this strategy cannot be overstated. To view a family member, even a troubled, rebellious one, as an enemy to be neutralized speaks to the deep dysfunction at the heart of the royal institution. It reveals a world where personal affection is always conditional, always subordinate to the demands of survival. Kate's discovery of the dossier brought this cold reality into stark relief. It forced a confrontation not just with Camilla's specific actions, but with the entire culture of the palace. A culture where trust was a liability, where openness was dangerous, where love itself could be weaponized. For Kate, this was an intolerable betrayal. For Camilla, it was simply the cost of doing business. In the end, the question is not why Camilla targeted Harry. The question is how a family, an institution, a monarchy could create an environment where such actions seemed necessary, even rational. Camilla's alleged campaign against Harry was not the act of a rogue operator. It was the logical product of a system that values survival above all else. It was a symptom of a deeper sickness within the heart of the monarchy, a sickness that no amount of public relations campaigns or glossy documentaries could fully hide. And as the cracks in the royal facade grew wider, the world would begin to see that behind the crowns, the titles, and the ceremonies, the royal family was, in many ways, just like any other family. Flawed, fearful, and, when threatened, capable of terrible betrayals. Camilla's actions, however secretive, illuminated a fundamental truth. In the end, the battle for the future of the monarchy would not be fought on public stages or at glittering banquets. It would be fought in the shadows, among those who knew each other's weaknesses best. And sometimes, the greatest threats to a dynasty do not come from outside forces, but from within. The days following Kate's confrontation with Camilla were eerily quiet. On the surface, palace life continued with its usual polished efficiency. Staff moved through the corridors, attending to their duties with professional smiles and lowered voices. Meetings were held. Engagements were planned. Public appearances were executed with the same mechanical grace expected of the royal family. But behind the scenes, something fundamental had shifted. The air was heavier, the silences longer, the glances sharper. The invisible web of loyalty and suspicion that held the palace together had been violently disturbed, and everyone could feel it. The first signs of fallout were subtle. Camilla's visits to Kensington became rare, almost non-existent. Excuses were made. Prior commitments, needing to focus on supporting Charles, minor health complaints. Officially, nothing had changed. But among those who worked closest to the royals, the message was unmistakable. Camilla was no longer welcome in Kate and William's domain. The staff at Kensington, long accustomed to navigating the complex, unwritten rules of royal hierarchy, quickly adjusted. Those who had been seen aligning too closely with Camilla found themselves sidelined, assigned to less prominent roles or encouraged to take extended leave. New faces began appearing in key positions, carefully vetted by Kate and William's most trusted advisors. It was a quiet purge, executed with a precision that spoke volumes about Kate's growing authority within the palace. She had not only defended her family's integrity, but had taken steps to ensure that the structures supporting betrayal were dismantled, piece by piece. Inside private offices and briefing rooms, the atmosphere was one of cautious recalibration. Trust had always been a rare commodity within the royal household. Now it was almost non-existent. Staff members spoke in hushed tones, careful about who they confided in. Every word was weighed, every loyalty questioned. Rumors circulated about secret meetings, hidden agendas, private warnings. The sense of living under constant scrutiny intensified. William played a crucial role during this period of fallout. He stood firmly beside Kate, reinforcing the decisions made after the confrontation with Camilla. Though he was known for his measured temperament and reluctance to stir unnecessary drama, in this case, he made it clear that protecting their branch of the family came first. His support sent a strong signal throughout Kensington. The new standard was loyalty to William, Kate, and the future they represented. Not everyone approved of the shift. Some older courtiers, long aligned with the traditionalist wing of the family, viewed Kate's actions as dangerously emotional, a breach of the royal family's prized culture of stoic indifference. In private conversations, they whispered about her supposed naivety, her inability to understand that royal life was about survival, not sentiment. But others, particularly younger staff members and more progressive advisors, saw in Kate's stand a breath of fresh air. They admired her courage in defending principles over politics, in choosing to protect rather than manipulate. For them, her actions offered a glimpse of what a modernized monarchy might look like, one rooted in integrity rather than cold calculation. The fallout also reached beyond Kensington's walls. Word of the confrontation and its consequences spread quietly through the broader royal network. At Clarence House, where Charles and Camilla resided, the atmosphere grew tense. Charles, caught between his loyalty to Camilla and his need to maintain unity within the family, reportedly urged a cooling-off period. He recognized the dangers of allowing internal divisions to become public scandals but struggled to find a path that would satisfy both sides. Camilla herself, while outwardly maintaining her public schedule, withdrew emotionally. She knew she had lost a crucial battle, one she had underestimated. Her influence within Kensington was gone. Her credibility among William and Kate's circle had been shattered. She remained a central figure beside Charles, but the sense of inevitability surrounding her rise to power had been punctured. In public, of course, none of this was visible. The royal family continued their duties, appearing together at national events, exchanging polite smiles and carefully staged photographs. The press, unaware of the drama unfolding behind palace walls, continued to focus on more superficial narratives. Fashion choices, public engagements, ceremonial milestones. But those with sharp eyes noticed the differences. The stiffness in body language between Kate and Camilla. The slight, almost imperceptible changes in seating arrangements during formal gatherings. The absence of casual, affectionate moments that once characterized their public appearances. The cracks were there, visible to those who knew where to look. Meanwhile, Harry and Meghan, now firmly entrenched in their new lives abroad, remained publicly silent about the latest developments. Whether they were aware of the confrontation between Kate and Camilla is unclear. Sources close to them suggested that they had largely cut off direct communication with most senior royals, preferring to maintain their distance rather than become entangled in further palace intrigue. Still, the irony was not lost on those within the palace. Harry, whose vulnerabilities had nearly been weaponized against him, remained a central, if silent, figure in the fallout. His pain, his struggles, his refusal to conform had sparked a chain of events that exposed the deep fault lines within the royal family. For Kate, the period following the confrontation was both exhausting and liberating. She bore the weight of her decision, aware of the enemies it had created and the pressures it had intensified. But she also experienced a newfound sense of agency. No longer merely a supporting figure, she had stepped into a role of real leadership, shaping not just her immediate environment, but the future direction of the monarchy. There were difficult days, moments of doubt and frustration. Confronting entrenched systems of power is never easy, and the royal household, for all its outward pageantry, remained a deeply conservative institution. There were cold shoulders at formal dinners, veiled criticisms couched in polite language, strategic leaks designed to undermine her credibility. Yet Kate remained steadfast. She focused on her children, her charitable work, her public duties. She refused to be drawn into petty battles or public spectacles. She understood that real change would not come from dramatic gestures but from consistent, principled action over time. And slowly, quietly, the culture within Kensington began to shift. New staff appointments emphasized emotional intelligence, loyalty, and ethical behavior. Briefings emphasized transparency and respect, rather than secrecy and manipulation. A subtle but profound transformation was underway, one that might, in time, help the monarchy evolve into a more humane, more relatable institution. The fallout from Kate's confrontation with Camilla marked the end of an era in palace politics. The old ways, ruthless, cynical, survivalist, had been challenged and, to some extent, dismantled. In their place, a new ethos was beginning to take root, fragile but real. It would not happen overnight. It would not erase the scars left by years of mistrust and betrayal. But it was a start. And in the quiet corridors of Kensington Palace, among the portraits of kings and queens long gone, the echoes of that change could be felt. The fallout had begun, but so too had the rebuilding. Kate's choice to confront the darkness rather than accommodate it had set in motion a new chapter, one that would define not just her legacy, but the legacy of the royal family itself in the challenging years to come. William's position during the fallout was one of profound complexity. As heir to the throne, he was bound by tradition, duty, and centuries of expectation. Every move he made, every word he spoke, carried the weight of future kingship. Yet, as a husband and a brother, he was deeply entangled in the personal conflicts tearing at the fabric of his family. The decision to support Kate after her confrontation with Camilla was not made lightly, but it was made with clarity. William had always been protective of Kate. From the earliest days of their relationship, he understood the pressures she would face entering the royal family. He knew how brutal the institution could be, how little mercy it showed to outsiders, how it consumed even those born into it. Over the years, he had seen Kate navigate these treacherous waters with grace, patience, and an unwavering sense of dignity. Her loyalty to the family was never in question. Her respect for the institution was deep. But when she came to him with the evidence of Camilla's betrayal, William realized that loyalty could not mean blind obedience. The night after the confrontation, Kate laid out everything she had found. She spoke calmly, presenting the facts without embellishment, but William could see the pain and anger beneath her controlled exterior. She showed him the dossier, the annotations, the calculated way Harry's vulnerabilities had been catalogued. William listened carefully, asking few questions, processing the enormity of what she revealed. He had always harbored reservations about Camilla, despite the public narrative of reconciliation. Their relationship had been cordial, functional, but never truly close. Now, the lines were drawn with brutal clarity. He made his decision swiftly. He would stand with Kate. It was not just a matter of personal loyalty. It was a matter of principle. William understood that the monarchy could not survive if it cannibalized its own members. The public was not blind. They could sense authenticity or the lack of it. If the royal family wanted to endure into the next century, it would have to embody the values it publicly championed. Integrity, compassion, loyalty. Allowing Camilla's actions to go unchecked would send a dangerous message, not just within the family, but to the entire world. It would confirm the worst suspicions about the monarchy, that it was a cold, self-serving institution that valued image over humanity. William refused to let that happen. He convened a private meeting with his closest advisors. No minutes were taken. No official record was made. The discussion was brief and pointed. Effective immediately, Camilla's access to Kensington Palace would be limited. Her influence over William and Kate's household would be ended. Any staff found to be complicit in gathering or sharing private information without authorization would be reassigned or dismissed. William's actions were deliberate, precise. He understood the need for subtlety. A public feud with Camilla would create a media firestorm that could damage the monarchy irreparably. The changes would be made quietly, under the radar, framed as routine reorganizations and strategic shifts. But those within the palace understood exactly what was happening. William also reached out to Charles, informing him of the steps being taken. It was not a request for permission. It was a courtesy, a professional acknowledgement of the hierarchy. Charles, according to sources, was deeply troubled by the news but ultimately chose not to intervene. His relationship with William, though sometimes strained, was built on a mutual understanding of the monarchy's long-term survival. Publicly, they would present a united front. Privately, Charles understood that Camilla's miscalculation had cost her dearly. In the weeks that followed, William played a critical role in stabilizing Kensington Palace. He reassured staff, emphasized the importance of discretion and professionalism, and worked closely with Kate to reinforce a culture of trust and loyalty. His presence sent a clear message. The future king stood behind his wife, and by extension, behind the new standards she was setting. William's leadership during this time reflected a maturation that had been long in the making. Once seen as the more temperamental of the brothers, known for his flashes of anger and impatience with media intrusion, William had grown into a figure of steady resolve. He understood the burden of his destiny, and he accepted it with a seriousness that few could appreciate from the outside. But beneath the public composure, William carried his own share of private anger. The betrayal against Harry stirred deep emotions. Their relationship, already battered by years of misunderstanding and hurt, had never fully recovered from the events surrounding Megxit. Yet, Harry remained his brother. Seeing Harry's pain catalogued and weaponized reopened old wounds and reminded William of the fragility of familial bonds under the weight of royal duty. There were nights when William sat in his private study, staring out over the palace gardens, grappling with the impossible contradictions of his role. He loved his family, but he loved the institution too. He believed in the monarchy's ability to do good, to serve as a symbol of continuity and national identity. Yet he also saw, with painful clarity, how easily it could devour its own in the name of survival. In choosing to stand with Kate, William made a choice not just about family, but about the kind of monarchy he wanted to lead someday. One built on authenticity, not manipulation. One that protected its members rather than exploiting them. One that could survive the storms of modern scrutiny because it deserved to, not merely because tradition demanded it. It was a high ideal, and he knew the path to achieving it would be long and fraught with setbacks. The old guard within the palace would resist change. The media would continue to dig, to speculate, to sensationalize. And the wounds within his own family, especially with Harry, might never fully heal. But William was determined. The confrontation with Camilla was not the end. It was the beginning of a new phase in the royal family's evolution, one that he and Kate would lead together. Together, they worked quietly to strengthen their household. They surrounded themselves with advisors who shared their vision for a modernized monarchy. They doubled down on their public engagements, emphasizing causes that spoke to real issues: mental health, early childhood development, climate change. They continued to build their image not through grand gestures or dramatic pronouncements, but through consistent, meaningful work. The rift with Camilla remained. There was no formal reconciliation, no apology sought or offered. Both sides understood the realities of royal life. Some battles are fought in silence, and some wounds are carried quietly because speaking them aloud would only deepen the scars. William's role during this period revealed the man he had become. Not just a future king, but a husband willing to defend his wife, a brother willing to protect his family's integrity, and a leader willing to chart a new course for an ancient institution. In the private corridors of Kensington, in the whispered conversations among staff, there was a new sense of clarity. The future belonged to William and Kate, and while the road ahead would be steep and treacherous, they would walk it together, guided by principles that no scandal, no betrayal, and no internal sabotage could shake. The quiet strength William displayed in these critical days set the tone for everything that would follow. And in doing so, he not only protected his family, he took the first steps towards securing the monarchy's future in a world that demanded more than ceremony. It demanded authenticity and, above all, humanity.